This is our time to choose faith, to go big.
Movement of men stepping up and breaking free from the chains of the secret life they've been living.
Come out of him right now. Come out of him. Get out of him.
Here's the deal.
You guys promise to do whatever it...
Does anyone feel like their YouTube algorithm is just a little bit off? Lately, I've been recommended all manner of strange and off-topic content. I'll be looking for something to put on in the background while I kick up my feet and resume my Ocarina of Time 3D binge. Next thing you know, I've spent 20 minutes scrolling through so many videos that are just low quality with like 200 views that are just so wildly off topic from my typical media consumption habits. I'll see random shit like motivational talk, how to turn your life around after your wife cucks you for your best friend. Am I the target audience here? Who is this for? I do not get this. It's not just my recommendations feed though. Other people I know, both on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, are all struggling with this kind of weird off-topic algorithm, and nobody seems to really understand why. Even YouTube's own staff agree that it's difficult to understand. In a June 2024 interview for NBC, YouTube spokesperson Elena Fernandez said,
"We welcome research on our recommendation system, but it's difficult to draw conclusions based on the test accounts created by the researchers, which may not be consistent with the behavior of real people. YouTube's recommendation system is trained to raise high-quality content on the homepage, in search results, and the Watch Next panel for viewers of all ages across the platform."
Really? Really? Is this high quality content, Elena? What's going on here? Now, this is in no way intended to be a diss at small creators, but I have to ask, if I'm getting these kinds of videos, should they at least be on topic? How does YouTube's recommendation system even work? Well, it starts with the user's media diet. Suppose that you're a mid-20s homosexual male with an interest in Drag Race. See, I'm not abandoning you, my Drag Race flock. Stay with me here. Now, let's say you go and watch last season's lip sync for the crown between Anya Nerve and Jules Sparkles, and angrily comment that your fave should have won and they were robbed. In engaging with this type of content, the algorithm will then try to recommend to you videos based on similar topics. It could be a drag queen's YouTube page, LGBTQ+ politics, Drag Race commentary, other gay shit that you homosexuals do. Couldn't be me, I don't know what you're talking about. The algorithm is predictive. It's designed to anticipate its users' next steps. And then it feeds you content based on, say, your political leanings, what you just searched up on Google, what you just purchased from Mr. S. Leather. Despite this though, YouTube's algorithm is not unlikely to still recommend off-topic content, especially in the realm of politics. That same NBC article from last June highlights a study from the Institute for Strategic Dialogue called Pulling Back the Curtain, an exploration on YouTube's recommendation system. In this study, researchers Aoife Gallagher et al. Created 4 unique internet personas with different interests: gamers, male lifestyle gurus, mommy vloggers, and Spanish language news. Each investigation had slight variations. For instance, having a male versus female gender for the gamer profile, or a 13-year-old versus a 30-year-old for the male lifestyle guru. There were some pretty interesting key takeaways, one of which was, despite the fact that none of these profiles were explicitly interested in religion, all of them were still pushed pretty right-wing Christian content. Furthermore, Gallagher et al. Wrote,
"Videos of Andrew Tate were also recommended to both the child and adult accounts, despite neither account showing an interest in him and Tate being banned from the platform." Again, YouTube did not place any age restrictions or content warnings on these videos.
And that's alarming, right? Getting video content promoting alleged sex trafficker Andrew Tate. Even if our media consumption habits are antithetical to these belief systems, we're still getting them pushed into our algorithms in spaces that we expect to be familiar and safe. One could argue that this is a good thing, you know? We're not confined to our echo chambers, and we're being exposed to different political views. And I would agree with you, if not for the fact that YouTube's algorithm was incredibly predictive. And if some random lonely teenage boy from Tuckahoe County, Idaho were to click on a Jordan Peterson lecture, well... This raises a lot of questions, like, if right-wing content is being pushed regardless of the user's habits, Is this a flaw or a feature of the system? What fascinates me more, though, is the algorithm's interaction with advertising. I've always found it so impressive how on topic a lot of the ads I've gotten in the last couple of years have been for, say, Vive Healthcare or Discovery. Truly, they are calling me the F slur, and I love that for me. Businesses call this targeted advertising, a practice based entirely on the user's personal data and habits. Founder and CEO of Cited, Nick Froelich, wrote for Forbes magazine in February 2022 about this very topic. He says,
"Targeted ads collect and analyze users' online activity and use this data to inform the type of ads a user is shown. For example, if users often search for tech supplies, they will be shown ads for the latest gadgets. Platforms and websites do this by collecting cookies, location information, and mine data. Today, modern marketing works best when it's personalized."
So, online advertising is intended to be personalized. Our media consumption habits and other public data are used by companies around the world to focus on specific communities that might want to buy their product the most. And there's also data brokers to consider as well. You know, a shitty industry full of people who collect, buy, and sell your personal data. You know, your legal address, your phone number, your social security number to other corporations to help inform their marketing decisions. Data brokers get their information from three key sources: government, consumer habits, and other public media, say what you post on Instagram. They then package your data and categorize it, and a single person could fit into multiple categories, say recent widower, pet owner, sports enthusiast. In a May 2024 study conducted by the Federal Trade Commission, plainly titled Data Brokers, A Call for Transparency and Accountability, the Commission says that because competition between the markets is rising and technology is greatly advancing, companies are getting determined to increasingly know their consumers at a granular level in order to know who best to market to. They're becoming increasingly desperate to know their consumers intimately. A major pitfall to this is that some categories that data brokers create statistically have higher populations of marginalized people. Categories like urban scramble are far more likely to consist of Black and Latinx Americans. These sensitive categories don't just have a large impact on, say, what kinds of advertisements are shown, but also how different companies interact with these types of individuals. Say, an insurance company spiking their rates for people who they think will be most likely to need them. Read, patients with diabetes. So, to the average business, I am likely categorized under gay male and liberal voter, which explains why I get so many goddamn ads every single year for Patrick Stewart begging me for money for every new humanitarian crisis that emerges. In theory, this sounds pretty nice, right? Like, who am I to complain that I'm getting on-target ads? At least I can just turn my brain off and skip them without a second thought. Sure, I do get a couple off-topic ads and videos every once in a while, but ultimately, at the end of the day, it's fine, right? Except it's not. Because what if the wrong institution gets the hold of your data? What if you're a marginalized person getting ads from a right-wing political party? What happens if you get an ad that's on topic, but for all the wrong reasons?
Lord God, in your goodness, have mercy on me. Do not look on my sins, but take away all my guilt. Create in me a clean heart, and renew within me an upright spirit. Lord Jesus, Son of God, have mercy on me, for I am a sinner, a sick, foul, wretched creature.
So, I got an ad for a Christian ministry that does conversion therapy. I was just sitting at home, drinking my water, minding my biz, when I got this ad.
The truth is, behind closed doors, the P word became my secret sin at age 10. And for the next 17 years of my life, what I did in the incognito tab made me feel like a hypocrite and a fraud as a husband, as a father, as a business owner.
Now you're probably thinking, Archie, that's not an ad for conversion therapy, it's an ad for pornography addiction. I can't believe you lied to me, this is clickbait. Stay with me here. I too would have probably brushed that ad off, like you, had he not said this.
I think that we can both agree that God didn't place this in front of you today by coincidence. And so I want to ask you a question. is a few minutes of your time worth seeing if this may be an answer to your prayers? Personally, I think that you owe it to yourself.
So I took the bait and went to this Unchained leader's website to find that pornography addiction was just the tip of the iceberg.
Our core focus in this program is to walk our members through a psychological journey to break the chains of unwanted sexual desires, including same-sex attraction, paying for sex, and other forms of sexual disorders.
This puts the whole God sent this to you for a reason into an entirely different context. I went on this emotional journey from confusion to disbelief to rage. God did not send this ad to me for some reason. This man did. There's a pretty strong chance that I got that ad because of my public data and media consumption habits. This is data that this business quite possibly could have gotten from data brokers. It was likely shown to me because I am queer. That is terrifying. 2025 has been the most hostile year for queer and trans people in recent memory. The Supreme Court in the UK just put out a ruling that basically says trans women cannot legally be recognized as women, and in the United States, the Trump administration as well. That it disturbs me that in the comfort of my home during a period of time where I was just trying to escape into the magic of Hyrule to break pots and torment cuckoos and lust after an evil, sexy dictator, I cannot even escape the horrors of the outside world because my algorithm is feeding content to me that is incredibly triggering. It's pushing a goddamn sexual disorder program on me. Now, I am a relatively confident person. I have a loving partner, stable community, and conviction in my own identity. I am not in some way susceptible to this idea that I am sexually broken. However, what worries me is that this advertisement, knowing what we just discussed about YouTube's algorithm, was likely sent to me because I am its target demographic. If I am getting this, who else is? Because while I am not so easily manipulated into this idea that I am sexually broken, there are plenty of other queer people that are not. And this video is for them and their loved ones. Queer and trans people are under attack around the world, and in order to best counter our opponents, I think it's best we learn their language and understand how they got to that way of thinking in the first place. Even if we ourselves don't necessarily agree with the politics, leftists and liberals are not immune to slipping into some form of puritanical way of thinking. Looking at you, fellow Zoomers. Today, we're jumping into the lion's pit. We're going to be analyzing this program called The Unchained Leader, its politics, what it's trying to say, and honestly, what the hell is even going on here? Because even if programs like this are peddling a crock of shit, I do think that there is something to be found in wisdom about pleasure, identity, shame, liberation, and desire itself. So, Mason Kane, father, husband, business owner, spiritual leader, I hope you're ready to play dirty. Cause I am not holding back. I've got my lap wide open for you, big boy, and I'm gonna show you just exactly how a twink can still top a titan. The Unchained Leader is a pseudo-behavioral therapy program designed to help people break the chains of unwanted sexual desires. The CEO and founder, Mason Kane, based out of Tampa, Florida, no surprise there, began promoting the program on September 1st, 2022, when he converted his Instagram page from chuggy Bible quote page to the AI slop hell that it is now. The Unchained Leader claims to be a program for any gender, but you'll notice that most of its marketing and focus is on men. The logo of the company features a male lion. This one ad over here says that over 300,000 men have signed up for the program. There is this kind of dimension of reclaiming traditional and heroic masculinity. The male lion throughout the history of media, think The Lion King for example, is often presented as this regal symbol of masculine strength, of kingship, leadership, this will to power. So in theory, this program could be for anyone, but in practice, like with most right-wing spaces, men are the priority. Literally, this post from April 11th of this year says,
Thomas flew in from Canada today for some bro time. Faith, family, fitness, finance. Never lie, never hide, never run away. Men who have broken free from darkness and are crazy enough to turn back around and charge right back into the darkness to fight for other souls. We are at war, men.
Do these people have a grass allergy? This explains why they never touch it. The advertisements shown on YouTube are the most popular videos on Mason's channel. This one from December 2024 has 14 million views, called The Key to Permanently Unlock the Chains of P-Word. The P-Word? Mason, what are we? Toddlers? Surely there is a more ad-friendly euphemism that doesn't make us sound like we're at recess.
I love you. You love me. We're best friends.
In these advertisements, Mason likes to articulate a few key points. 1, the P-word was a secret sin for 7 years. 2, addiction to the P-word is a symptom of a larger root problem. 3, watching this hour-long documentary will change your life. 4, if you want to break free from the chains, visit his website right now. Well, Mason, I went to your website, and it looks awful. I mean, who designed this? A Republican business major who failed all his marketing classes? The font is appalling. Where are the marketing twinks? Oh.
I'm 27 with no prospect of marriage.
All of the advertisements for the Unchained leader follow this structure. Personal testimony, cure to the root problem, join the club now. In doing so, Mason Kane sets himself up as this relatable figure, you know? He's struggled with adult content too, so he knows exactly what you're going through, and he's just the person to help if you buy this product now. It's a clever marketing tactic that influencers in general use for their audiences. You know, if they have this one problem, and so do you, and you trust them, well, what worked for them might work for you. Red flag. It creates this kind of hook, line, sinker reaction where he's promising you the cure to a lifelong struggle of shame and guilt. If you just click the link, give him his personal your information, and buying into the program, which is exactly what you should do if you're here right now. Like, comment, and subscribe.
Also follow me on Twitch at twitch.tv/thatarchiemerc. And Twitter at TheFairyType, and Instagram at ThatArchieMerc. Okay, bye!
If you go to the Unchained Leader's website, you'll find that there are pages dedicated to success stories, and FAQ, and blog posts. The success stories are nothing out of the ordinary, but what I find particularly curious is that a lot of the blog posts are published between late April to early July of 2024. The first one that caught my attention was one from May 2024 titled Porn-Induced Insomnia. What the fuck is porn-induced insomnia? Of course, it's full of AI-generated artwork, the prose is juvenile, and all of the scientific information presented on pornography addiction or brain chemistry, it's just, there's no source cited here. In fact, all of the information on all of these blog posts pertaining to biblical scripture or psychology and brain chemistry, it's all sourceless. There are no factual claims being backed up here. This is like Rhetoric 101, right? One of the first lessons that you learn when writing essays, like in elementary school, is cite your goddamn sources. Where is the Unchained leader getting this information from? So, to test a theory, I ran any text pertaining to factual information on these blog posts through an AI detector, and red flag. This man and his team have no actual scientific evidence to back up their claims. It's just a website full of conjecture and ChatGPT summaries, which are often full of misinformation and are painfully surface level. To the average tech-savvy person, this should be enough of a deterrent from the program. However, a lot of people are not good at detecting when something is written by AI. And if you're a person that's desperately looking to a solution for all their problems, you'll take anything said at face value. Christian fundamentalist programs like the Unchained Leader are not built on any scientific information or theories about cognitive behavioral therapy or sexual health. They're not run by trained psychologists or doctors for that matter. They are typically run by spiritual fanatics, or worse, finance bros. They base their entire operation off of scripture and testimony, and this makes complete sense if you understand Mason Kane's alleged story. Mason claims that he began his abusive relationship with porn at age 10. He got married at age 21, was an insurance broker executive by age 24, and he's the father of 2 children. He's a spiritual leader in the church. Okay, so he's got a white savior complex. Love that for him. And throughout his entire journey, he felt like a fraud. He claimed to be this holy man of God, but for 17 years lived this secret, double life. He felt ashamed and a failure because he kept watching pornography. According to him, it almost destroyed his marriage. And now, after turning his life around, God has compelled him to share his story and help save other men.
The only thing that I thank God for more than leading me to freedom is that he somehow convinced me to share my story of breaking free from secret sin on social media.
His life was almost ruined by temptation, by lust and pornography, but he was able to make massive improvements by identifying the real root causes of his sexuality. Should we really blame him for trying to help others with a noble cause and trying to make sure that other people's lives are improved? Well, yes. Yes, we should. One flaw in this way of thinking is that it assumes that what worked for one person must work for everyone else. It's a one-size-fits-all view of reality that assumes that if you just get rid of this one problem, everything's gonna get better. Furthermore, it makes this assumption that just because one person was unhappy watching it and dealing with their sexuality, well, that must mean everyone else is equally unhappy and lost in their lives. In addition to requiring you share your information with the program to access this hour-long documentary they keep teasing in every goddamn ad, the Unchained Leader does not put its pricing up front. On the FAQ page, they say,
"We don't post pricing online for a reason. Not because we are hiding anything, but because context matters. Most guys come in thinking about what this will cost them, but the real question is, what has staying stuck already cost you? And what will staying stuck continue to cost you? Our program is affordable, and we have flexible payment options to adapt to your current situation. But I will tell you that if you're looking for a free or cheap fix, there are a plethora of those options that have been available for decades, and our 90 Days to Freedom Intensive is not in the free or cheap fix category. Personally, on my healing journey, I didn't want to be in any rooms with men who didn't make a sacrifice to be there, and weren't 100% committed to the intensity level that breaking free requires. We don't have any uncommitted men sitting in victimhood complaining circles here."
Okay, so there's also a dig at real addiction support groups. Great.
Like, if you're serious about finally breaking free, bro, you don't have time for that. Unchained Leader is the right option if you're ready to get to work.
It creates this condescending distinction between the sad, cheap programs that are just victimhood complaining circles and don't actually fix your problems, with the real, effective program that may not be cheap or free, but at least it delivers results. Right? YouTuber Chester McGreer made a video last July covering the Unchained Leader's aggressive ad campaign. In the video, he revealed that doing research to see how much it cost, plans could be over $1,000 just for access to the 90-day program. If you go to the subreddits r/nofapchristians and r/Christian marriage, people have some pretty choice words to say about this program. Let's take a look. Also, this is all hearsay and alleged. I cannot confirm from these people if this is true. Mason Kane, please don't sue me. In fact, Everything said in this video happened in Minecraft, and it's all alleged. It's not real. Alleged. It's not real. Please don't sue me. It's alleged. Anyways, let's just go see what these chuckle fucks have to say.
I went through the whole video watching at Unchained Leader and then answered the questions and set up a callback date for this Thursday at 10 a.m. I received a confirmation email from someone named Brett Dixon /organizer. I emailed him back thanking him for the confirmation and simply asked him how much the program was going to cost, only to receive another email from him about an hour later, canceling my phone meeting with him with zero reasoning. When we got to pricing, Dan Hawkins said it would be about $2,500 and that he could give me half off out of generosity, which I'm sure he feeds that crap to everyone. I said that sounded okay, but funds are really tight and I could only do about $350 as a down payment and asked if he could help work something out. Not kidding, his face completely changed and said that he couldn't help me and that I'm not right for the program. This dude had the audacity to say that you have the funds, you just didn't want to pay, or I'm beginning to think you lied on your application, and trying to gaslight me to say that I'm not 100% committed, or that I needed to invest in myself.
Okay, this one right here is my personal favorite. It says,
"It's really sickening to see, because so many men are in real hurt and pain, and it's disgusting to see greedy, heartless people taking advantage of them. As far as I'm concerned, they're working for the devil. If you really do have the solution, and you really are a compassionate servant of God, why not just reveal the answer in your ad and be done with it?"
If you go down this thread right here, you'll see that it starts out very critical towards the program, but becomes overpopulated with people who say how much they love the Unchained Leader over time. As one Redditor put it,
"Hasn't anyone figured out that the positive reviews of the program are bots? There are obvious mistakes that paid bots make, and the accounts lead to nowhere. The accounts are literally created just to comment on this thread, and nobody wonders?" Yawning emoji.
You know what, Mason? If helping people mattered so much, especially with relinquishing the chains of unwanted desires, wouldn't the cost not matter that much at all? Wouldn't charity trump business needs? Why do you have to have these people's personal information before they can access the start of this hour-long documentary that you keep teasing? Doesn't Christ call you people to act with charity and compassion and understanding and empathy? Doesn't that matter more than profit? Wherefore art the Good Samaritan? In my opinion, this program is one of the most sinister things that I have come across in my time on the internet, and I have seen the abyss of 4chan. It's like if Tony Robbins, that one priest from Boy Erased, and fucking Tom Brady had a monster love child. It's no secret that a lot of young Christian men tend to come from sheltered backgrounds that aren't super tech savvy. Unless you're aware on how influencer marketing strategy works or how to pick up on AI generated text, you're the most likely to fall for something like this. It seems to prey on ignorance about technology, shame of sexuality, and a desire to be pious. It's probably a scam. If you're wondering if I'm gonna be reacting to the documentary that he keeps teasing in all these ads, fuck no. I am not giving this man my personal information, not that he doesn't already have it. No amount of YouTube clout is worth subjecting myself to that, especially when I can probably already guess what a lot of it is going to say. Now, I could end the video here because my typical demographic, leftist, Gen Z, and millennial Drag Race fans and alumni all probably know this and just want to watch to find something to get angry about. And fair enough. This is something to be very angry about. But for me, it's not enough to critique the business. I want to take this person's arguments seriously and understand what they are, where they come from, and how to unpack them. If by happenstance some of these advertisements find you or a loved one in a vulnerable state, the last thing I want is to lose another queer or trans sibling to this way of thinking. I want us to be able to arm ourselves with the knowledge to help protect ourselves and our loved ones from people like this. So, using Mason Kane and the Unchained Leader as a case study, let's go down the sexual disorder rabbit hole. Strap in, Alice, it's about to get bumpy!
Part 1. The Myth of Pornography Addiction.
Mason Kane's program is fixated on trying to cure men of an attachment to pornography. But is this true? Is it even possible to be addicted to pornography? Well, at face value, it sounds like it. I have often heard that pornography addiction is one of the greatest challenges facing relationships in our time. Growing up, I certainly remember my own family making accusations that men, in particular, struggled with pornography and sex addiction. In order to understand the rhetoric behind pornography or sex addiction, we have to understand what psychologists call a behavioral addiction, a pattern of behavior centered around repeating specific activities that promote pleasure in an attempt to alleviate certain negative feelings, say, anxiety or insecurity. On this, Addiction Center, generic name, lol, says,
some don't factor in non-substance addictions like food addiction, phone addiction, social media addiction, or video game addiction, which often manifests as a behavioral addiction due to underlying mental health challenges. Those who become addicted to specific activities seek out feelings of comfort, happiness, or chemical releases, dopamine or serotonin, or can form behavioral addictions to escape reality or painful emotions.
At first glance, this kind of makes sense. I mean, Gen Z is no stranger to being told that we're phone addicts. We can't go anywhere without them and we have to use them constantly in place of social interaction. But the more I think about it, the more qualms I have. For starters, calling something as normal as frequent phone usage or sexual activity an addiction creates intense stigma around using it in the first place. It draws a harsh line between what is acceptable behavior and what isn't. And it's not lost on me that the people that are typically drawing those lines are people in power from dominant ideologies, say Judeo-Christianity, to pick a random example. I think it's stigmatizing and dismissive when we hyperbolize such casual activities as an addiction when they reach a point of excess, because often what counts as a point of excess is in itself a societal construct. Think about how straight men will talk about women when they get too much plastic surgery. Man, she's gone too far. She just can't stop getting Botox, bro. Oh my god, she looks like a botched sex doll. Bro, she used to be so hot. I do not make a convincing straight man, and that's okay. In their 1988 study, The Myth of Sexual Compulsion, Martin Levine and Jordan Troidan write,
perceptions of control over erotic impulses, however, are social constructions. Definitions of controlled and uncontrolled sexuality are cultural inventions specific to particular societies at particular times. In any given society, sexual scripts provide the standards determining erotic control and normalcy. What one society regards as being sexually out of control or deviant may or may not be viewed as such in another.
Applying this school of thought to other behaviors, we could argue that, well, what constitutes as excessive phone usage is often defined by people who simply grew up without phones. Societal expectations are often written and rewritten based on the age, class, politics, and more of the people who are in power. And I suspect that in the coming decades, our cultural understandings of phones and excessive phone usage are going to change. Now, I do think there are some behavioral patterns listed under behavioral addictions that are genuinely harmful to our well-being, say excessive gambling. This is also not intended to be dismissive of genuine criticism of the medium of pornography. There are legitimate things to criticize, such as substituting comprehensive sex education with pornography, the mistreatment of women by their male co-stars, racial fetishization, and the lack of opportunities present for trans performers in mainstream erotic entertainment. It's true that there is no shortage of real things to criticize about the industry of pornography and entertainment in general. But I also think we could all benefit from being quite more discerning about what constitutes something as serious an affliction as an addiction. For example, take the English recovery program, Recovery Lighthouse. God, why are all these names so goddamn generic? Who is on their marketing team? My God. Take the English recovery program, Recovery Lighthouse, and their definition on what they call a love addiction. Quote,
love addiction is an obsessive attachment to and dependency on another person. It often involves intense feelings of infatuation and longing for the other person and can lead to inappropriate behavior such as prolonged stalking or obsessive communication. The subject of love addiction can be a current partner, an ex, or even a stranger. Love addiction can also be a generalized dependency on relationships and deep dissatisfaction when single.
How do I put this delicately? This is fucking stupid. This definition takes ordinary experiences like intense infatuation with a partner and dependency on validation and conflates it with something as serious and toxic a behavior as stalking. To me, what the Recovery Lighthouse describes as a love addict sounds like just a person that needs to go to therapy to learn how to respect other people's boundaries and, well, how to learn to be comfortable on their own, not someone who needs to follow this 12-step program. This definition is simultaneously trivializing and hyperbolic. Like, there are plenty of more rational explanations for someone's toxic love patterns than simply calling them a love addict. Is an ex-boyfriend who stalks you a love addict? Or are they simply a fucking creep who does not know the concept of respecting your goddamn boundaries and just letting shit go? Literally, the only behavioral addiction listed under the DSM-5 is gambling. So take what you will of that. To categorize frequent interactions with such ordinary behaviors as self-pleasure as an addiction is, in my opinion, problematic. Is masturbating 6 times a day a sign of an addiction? No! It's just the hallmark of someone who's experiencing a period of high libido, something that is completely banal, especially if you're someone who has high testosterone levels. We certainly could be learning the benefits of time and place, delayed gratification, moderation. I personally don't think it's the best idea to go into the office and watch an MMF threesome on RedTube on the clock. But let's also be so for real here. Humans are incredibly fucking horny. We're voyeuristic. We love to watch other people and live vicariously through other individuals, be it through realism or fantasy. That's why porn exists in the first place, to fulfill vicarious sexual fantasy. Male sexuality in particular is often understood as this immortal beast that needs to be satiated. And I would argue that it's much better to make peace with the beast and learn its language than to straight up just put it down. Is it possible to be addicted to pornography and sex? Maybe. But it's also possible to be addicted to improving your car.
I am addicted to being Madonna.
I love being Madonna. I am Madonna, but I want to be Adam.
Your husband, Johnny, who jerks off after long meetings at work, could be addicted to porn, or maybe they would just rather watch something while jerking off because jerking off on its own is boring. I'll say it. Jerking off without visual stimuli is boring. I need a drink. Take a big old sip, motherfuckers. Here's to oversharing on the internet. A big old swing for oversharing on the internet. That's great. That's one of my best improv moments. I reject the idea that pornography and sex addiction are as commonplace as people say they are. I'm not outright denying its existence. I'm sure there is a very real group of people who do suffer from an addiction-like dependency on pleasure, but again, it's probably a small set of people. It's not that common. There are far more rational explanations as to why someone would watch porn a lot than this demonization of our natural human libido. And that's because for a lot of us, most of us don't understand what an addiction actually is. Dependence on a substance alters your brain chemistry, your behaviors, your personality. Sex does not, because sex is not a substance. It's an experience. Conflating something as serious as an addiction to something as ordinary and banal as, masturbation, or sex for even that matter, is a non sequitur. I would argue that this framework prevents us from having more nuanced and interesting and open discussions about our own sexuality and desires because they're so firmly rooted in stigma. And sexuality is more than just what gender you find attractive. There's kink, hypersexuality to asexuality, dominance to submission, and more. We could be having these conversations, but it's impossible to do so when you're operating under the framework that high libido is a manifestation of a disease like addiction. This is where pseudoscientific programs like the Unchained leader become incredibly insidious. They're selling you this cure-all, a permanent freedom to sexual disorders, when it is they themselves that have created the disorders in the first place.
Psychosexual disorders are social constructions, that is, stigmatizing labels attached to sexual patterns that diverge from culturally dominant sexual standards. There is nothing intrinsically pathological in the behavior that falls into the category of psychosexual disorders. They are defined as pathology only because they violate prevailing erotic norms.
To clarify, this is not an endorsement of genuinely harmful sexual patterns, like pedophilia. I think we can all agree that no matter what time period you are in, it is unequivocally wrong to wield sexual dominance over someone that is incapable of giving legal and verbal consent. What Troidan and Levine are articulating is that what constitutes a sexual disorder is often subjective. Having, say, multiple sexual partners over the course of a year might be seen as a sexual disorder in a rural Christian community, but not in a queer village in a large metropolitan area. This becomes all too obvious when we pause to consider that what typically Western countries and cultures call healthy relationships with love and sex are typically rooted in Judeo-Christian values. And this puritanical way of thinking is not something that liberals are immune to. Think of chronically online Gen Z TikTokers who think that sex scenes in movies are bad and that paying for a monthly OnlyFans subscription is tantamount to buying drugs. They are supporting the Judeo-Christian value that public expressions of sex are bad.
Why don't you hop on Google and make a quick search? I think you're gonna like what you see.
Anyways, back to the Unchained leader. Mason Kane said he felt like a fraud because he probably existed in a community where hypersexuality and libido and interacting with pornography and extramarital sexual activity is seen as shameful. Don't lust after the same sex, don't watch porn, don't have sex before marriage, you know the song and dance. He talks so much about this shame cycle that he used to feel between resisting his own desires and failing to do so, only to beat himself up over again, try again, fail, and repeat over and over again.
But I felt trapped in this cycle of resisting temptation and then failing, resisting and failing over and over again. And the only thing
it is a quintessential aspect to the Unchained leader marketing strategy, which brings us to Dr. David J. Lee, author of The Myth of Sex Addiction.
Hi, editor Archie popping in here. I just want to say that in doing additional research for this video while editing the video on some of the people that I have provided lovely argumentation to help me form my own arguments, I have discovered that some trans people have sounded the alarm on Dr. Lay because he has apparently in the past associated and promoted the work of other bigoted, transphobic sex therapists like James Cantor, who is a trans medicalist, and a TERF, and white boy podcaster, D-trans panic promoter, Benjamin Boyce. I haven't seen him actively say things like trans kids shouldn't be transitioning or, you know, blah, 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 like trans people die, I mean, and whatnot. So he seems quite empathetic to the plight upon trans people and trans youth in particular. But I also want to be clear in the fact that to my audience, because I want to avoid a Buck Angel situation, and he has unfortunately interacted, which again, interaction does not equal endorsement, but also want to be clear that he has interacted with Buck Angel. Don't think I need to go into that one, because if you know, you know. I just want to be clear here that by bringing his arguments around sex negativity and sex addiction and pornography and religion into this conversation, which I do ultimately agree with and support, and I think he's got a lot of great takes on human sexuality as it pertains to masculine identity and sexuality and queerness and sexuality. I do agree with a lot of his takes on that, but I don't support, and I do not like, and I'm very critical, and I hope he gets better about this. I do not like the fact that he has associated his brand with some pretty trans medicalist stupid people, because I, first of all, would be nothing without my trans viewers. Trans rights. I also firmly believe that transmedicalism as a political ideology is ultimately will do greater harm to trans people in the long run. And well, again, he himself, I don't believe has outright said anything transmedicalist, although I am not someone who hasn't gone through medical transition, so I might not be the best person to arbiter on this. I am critical of his decision to associate his brand with some pretty scummy people. I'm gonna be honest. So again, empathy is great, man. Transmedicalism is not. Just want to be clear. I'm just putting this in here as a clarification point because the last thing I want is my brand to be associated with bigotry and transphobia. And like, this is probably an overcorrection, but I also just want to like really make my stance incredibly clear on this so nothing is lost in translation. I stand by trans people. I love the trans people in my life. Transmedicalism is a very stupid, flawed ideology that for some people might come from a place of empathy, but really is ultimately going to cause the most amount of harm to trans people, especially our young trans people. I grew up firsthand around people who transitioned at a young age when they were minors and had access to puberty blockers and HRT well before they were adults. And I have firsthand experience of seeing how that has helped people. I am simultaneously very supportive of the work that he has done for sex workers and for deconstructing shame and stigma around sexuality, while also being critical of his decision to associate his brand with stupid people. Stupid transphobic people. So we just can't have nice things, can we? Ugh.
In a Psychology Today article from April 4th of this year, Lay discusses how numerous researchers have found evidence disproving the existence of pornography addiction. Quote,
"If the concept of pornography addiction were true, then porn-related problems would go up, regardless of morality, as porn use goes up. But the researchers didn't find that. In fact, they cite numerous studies showing that even feeling like you struggle to control your porn use doesn't actually predict more porn use. What that means is that the people who report great anguish over controlling their porn use aren't actually using more porn. They just feel worse about it."
They just feel worse about it. Most people who claim to have a disordered sexuality are people who struggle with intense feelings of guilt about their own desires. They struggle with the cognitive dissonance between the conflict of their own desires and the morality of what they've been taught. Nature versus nurture. Men like Mason Kane probably have high libidos. They probably do enjoy the voyeuristic nature of adult entertainment, but because they grew up believing it's a sin, a moral defect, a temptation from Lucifer driving you away from God's design for man and woman, they probably felt distress. In Porn versus Religion, a Psychology Today article from 2016, Dr. Lay discusses the findings of a special edition that same year from the Journal of Sexual Addiction and Compulsivity. He says,
"It was noteworthy that a large majority, 57% of the individuals in the study, all drawn from people actually in treatment for sex addiction, were both religious and in committed relationships. This provides further evidence of the degree to which sex addiction itself is a concept built on the foundations of religion and monogamy."
Moreover,
atheists and people with lower religious beliefs were much less likely to report problems with their own porn use, or to describe themselves as porn addicts. In these results, it was the belief in God, not just participation in church, which was the most predictive of a person feeling addicted to porn.
Porn and sex addiction are concepts rooted in Judeo-Christian values. There is a grain of truth that people do struggle with immoderation and impulse control, but in general, the concept of porn and sex addiction is not a real capital A addiction. It's definitely not listed in the DSM-5 for that matter either. But these people do not want you to think like that. They are hyper-skeptical of long-standing scientific institutions like medicine or psychology because they are often divorced from Judeo-Christianity and, more often than not, disprove Judeo-Christian theories on nature itself. This puritanical way of thinking, of life, of understanding human sexuality through such strict boundaries and criminalizing anything seen as deviant can create such intense psychological distress for anyone that isn't following in suit and feels guilt about those feelings. It labels anything outside of these boundaries as vile, disorderly, toxic, the work of the enemy. Speaking of, let's talk about the real reason why I made this video in the first place. The other cure that the Unchained leader promises its people.
Part 2. Same-sex attraction as sexual disorder.
The Christian homophobe is a stock character in our pop culture. From the Westboro Baptist Church to the picketers in Taylor Swift's You Need to Calm Down, the idea of this loud, contemptuous bigot is nothing new. And if you are LGB and or T, there's a pretty strong chance that you've encountered them at least once in your lifetime. Now would also be a good time to mention, I used to be a member of the Catholic Church. I was a cradle Catholic, so I've been a member since birth. I've been through every single sacrament all the way through confirmation. My confirmation name was Jude, by the way. Patron saint of the lost causes, if that's any poetic foreshadowing. I was a youth minister from ages 15 to 18, and I attended a Catholic university. While I was fortunate enough to grow up in the San Francisco Bay Area and in primarily Jesuit communities, anti-LGBT bigotry was kind of unavoidable still. There was a Sunday when I volunteered to be an altar boy because one of the regulars was out sick that day and they needed a hand, so I, stepped up to do the job. When the priest that day went to go and deliver the homily, instead of giving, a thoughtful, nuanced discussion about the reading, he decided to go on a 15-minute old man rant about how the homosexuals were destroying society and the family unit. Really? Is that what I get? I volunteer my free time on a Sunday to help you out, and you go out of your way to say the gays are bad, actually? How could you do this to me, Senpai Green? I trusted you. At the time, I was also freshly outed to my family, which did not go over well. So you can imagine how something like that would intensely amplify my own feelings of shame. I spent the next 6 years of my life hopelessly tied to that sense of shame and guilt. I did everything I could to convince other Catholics, mostly adults, that I was a normal gay, a good gay, one of the real ones. I coped with my deep insecurity about being inadequate in the eyes of my family and the church by seeking external validation and trying to change people's minds. I was the final boss of Not Like Other Gays, the Ubermensch of respectability politics.
Pick me, look, pick me, look, pick me.
Now, I did persuade some people. Many of my relatives, including my own immediate family, have all grown and changed for the better since I was outed, and I feel very deeply privileged to have been able to have that experience because there are plenty other queer and trans people, especially from religious families, that don't. However, when I was 18, I had this distinct feeling that something was wrong and I was in the incorrect environment. I remember one Sunday early that year when I was at Mass with my family, I decided not to recite the Nicene Creed and just spent the time looking around and observing my parish, and they were all just droning on in monotone sounds. They all looked asleep, unable to awake from a dream. And it was in that moment that I had the revelation, I am in the wrong place. I was doing everything I could to appease my relatives, but in doing so was sacrificing everything about me, my desires and my humanity, at the altar of an institution that asked for me to be repressed. So I left, and I haven't looked back since. In the years following, I had intense panic attacks whenever my family would force me to go to Mass when I'd return for the holidays. There was never an option to say no, and for someone who was trying to unpack their religious trauma and baggage around their identity, that's scary. Going back to Mass at that time was like being forced to be around my middle school bully. I was so triggered because a lot of my own shame and self-loathing about my identity stemmed from the church itself. And this is not an uncommon experience for LGBTQ+ people who leave the church. In a 2025 blog post, New York Times bestselling author Rachel Held Evans wrote,
I have several friends who were so traumatized by their experiences with Christians, they can't even walk through the doors of a church without suffering a physical reaction similar to PTSD, uncontrolled shaking, sweating, and panic. And I have cried with parents of LGBT kids who were stripped of membership in their beloved churches simply because they wouldn't publicly denounce their children.
Yup. just about sums it up. Now, I don't feel this way about the Catholic Church anymore. In fact, I have a deep appreciation for Jesuit theologians in particular, some of whom have been the most politically informative for me as a leftist. I also want to give a big shout out to Brenda Marie Davies, who used to run the YouTube channel God is Gray. I mean, that channel was like a light in the dark for me and was so deeply validating as someone who's trying to reconcile their own Christian identity with their sexuality and their liberal politics. It was informative, and I hope she's doing well. She helped me a lot at that time. At the time of recording this video, Brenda is still raising funds for herself after losing her home in the LA fires that happened earlier this year. She is a single mom and has used her work to help other people. The GoFundMe is still available if you'd like to help support her in getting back on her feet. You can also find her on Instagram. Now that I'm thinking about it, this is kind of like a reverse testimony, how I left the church. This is my movement! Okay, I guess I kind of see the appeal of it now. Point being is, I am intimately familiar with people like Mason Kane. Here's what he has to say on The Queers. Let's take a look.
This isn't liberal. It's child abuse. The enemy isn't even hiding anymore.
Strap in.
The enemy is coming for your child sexuality on Netflix. Did God create some people gay? I got death threats last time I posted about this, so that means I'm on the right track here. The enemy wants you to buy into the broken identity of being gay. Love the sinner, hate the sin. Jesus, a man attracted to men isn't gay because...
This is one from June 2023, attacking beloved teen webcomic Heartstopper, the most wholesome thing I have read in my goddamn life.
The teen section of Barnes & Noble. Here are a few things I want to point out. What I want to point out here is the spiritual warfare going on around us. The enemy's favorite way to fight is dirty. Teens are at a developmental stage that makes the hormones go a little crazy. From a psychology perspective, where are your sources? I do not understand where he's getting this information from. They're in a very vulnerable state to sexual influence. The enemy is going to target any vulnerability he can. The same roots that create sexual urges for things like porn are the same roots that create urges in the form of same-sex attraction.
Mason, just fucking log off.
Gay, pervert, sex addict, alcoholic are all identities based on lies and are one of the many beliefs keeping you stuck. You are not your sin.
So, I should point out here that conflating homosexuality to a drug addiction is violently irresponsible. When I was first outed to my relatives, one of them told me, "It's okay, Archie. Some people struggle with heroin addiction, and God didn't make them addicts. We can fix them too." What people like Kane believe is that to be a homosexual is tantamount to having, like with watching pornography, a dangerous and destructive pattern of behavior that can be medically treated like an addiction. And of course, he always ends all of these posts on Instagram with, "Type X in the comments to learn how you can start the journey that saved so many men." What people like Mason Kane fail to identify is that this whole concept of homosexuality is a sin is also a social construct created by Christians. If queer and trans people grew up in communities where they weren't shamed for their identity, they wouldn't think there's something wrong with them in the first place. Bible thumpers like Mason use what we call clobber verses. You know, Leviticus, if man lies with another man, it's an abomination. The clobber verses like Romans 1:27 and Leviticus 20:37 are basically anti-LGBT Christians' biggest scriptural defense. But throughout the entire history of the Bible's existence, there has been consistent disagreement on what the English translation should actually be from the original Greek prose. In fact, many theologians and scholars argue that "man lie with another man" is a mistranslation. The original Greek prose says it's "man lie with boy." It's a condemnation of pedophilia. not homosexuality. Of course, this crowd is also the kind of people that argue that homosexuals are in fact pedophiles, so good luck explaining that to them.
Stop confusing our babies with your groomer gender ideologue. Shame on you.
A lot of Christians tend to use the Bible as a guide for human sexuality itself, but to me that doesn't seem very smart, because the Bible was written during an incredibly oppressive time. For example, women had virtually no sense of political or social agency. Before their husbands, their lives were determined by their fathers. Furthermore, the Bible has been translated and mistranslated time and again. There are dozens of different versions of scripture. The New English Version, the King James Bible, the one the Mormons use. It seems plausible that the original meaning of the text has been lost to time. That's not true, because God's truth prevails across all time and space, no matter what the scriptures say. In my experience, Christian fundamentalists and conservatives see the Bible in only the strictest, most literal terms. It reminds me a lot of the debate around the United States Constitution. On the one hand are originalists, people who believe that the Constitution is an inflexible document that should only be interpreted in the way that the framers of the Constitution intended it to be. And then on the other hand, you have people who believe that the Constitution is a living document. You know, it is flexible, adaptable to the times. People like myself. It shouldn't come as a shock that there is a pretty big overlap between people who identify as Christian fundamentalists and originalists of the Constitution. Anyways, Mason loves to point out that whenever he speaks the truth about the gays, he gets violently and viciously attacked online. Usually, it's always right-wing Christians that tend to play the role of the martyr whenever they speak out against social progress. We call this phenomena the Evangelical persecution complex. Here's Held Evans on that.
It has become a familiar refrain. We hear it every Christmas when an unexpected store clerk wishes the wrong Christian happy holidays instead of Merry Christmas. We hear it whenever a high school drops its traditional pre-football game prayer out of respect for those students who may be Jewish or Muslim or non-religious. An entire industry of books and films has blossomed in the red soil of the American Christian persecution complex, with the first God's Not Dead installment caricaturing and vilifying atheists, and the second set to expose liberal efforts to expel God from the classroom once and for all.
It's a mythology that runs very deep in many Christian conservative communities today. To be an open practicing Christian in today's America basically means that you are a perpetual victim of a lynch mob trying to erode religious liberties, expel religion itself and Christianity from public life, and secularize the world. As if the vast majority of Americans don't practice Christianity, every sitting president and most politicians have been Christian, and the literal fucking Pledge of Allegiance says, one nation under God. People like Mason Kane, who speak out against social justice movements, interpret any form of backlash as a divine sign that they are the quiet minority speaking truth to power. They see themselves as martyrs, willing to die for a cause, be it for women, the church, children, God herself. It's a dualistic worldview that's incredibly childish. In an op-ed for Sojourners by Kevin Singer called Why I Ditched the Evangelical Persecution Complex, Singer shares in a story about how encountering pushback from college faculty about Christianity was something that further pushed him into this idea that there was a deep anti-Christian bias in public life. Quote,
pushback on our beliefs and practices was almost always romanticized as a fulfillment of the persecution that Jesus foretold his followers would experience, e.g. Matthew 10:16-33, John 16:33, then was quickly followed by prayers for our enemies and requests that God would remove obstacles to the success of our ministry. I remember telling my brethren from other campuses that my university was a dark place with very few Christians who took their faith seriously.
Singer was actually able to leave the school of thought, though. When he talked to other actual religious minorities and their experiences, his worldview opened up. I believe one of the reasons why Christians like formerly Singer and currently Mason Kane feel this intense martyr complex is not just because they want to model their life after their religious icon, but also because a lot of them probably assume that they are the main characters of reality. They are the chosen flock, separated from the rest of the sheep, and they are called to be shepherds and save as many people as possible. Growing up in the church, Catholics were never the most outspoken about their evangelicalism, but they were still very bent on the practice of conversion. Instead of going and preaching to the choir, though, they were a lot more subtle about their tactics. Be nice to others and invite them to ask why your life is so meaningful. They'll find that God is the reason that your life matters so much. Hey, you should invite your non-Christian friends to youth ministry tonight. Maybe they'll have a great time and see what it's all about.
Dear dumb ass, every thought in your mind is dumb. Every word you speak is dumb.
It's this kind of smugness that creates a dichotomy between the convert always struggling down the path of righteousness and the normie, ignorant, unfulfilled, aimless. To many Christians like Mason, saving others from damnation is paramount because they understand humanity as a divine battle between the foot soldiers of God and the enemy. And by the enemy, I mean minorities. Right-wing evangelicals and other conservative Christians will use satanic influence as a pretext to justify any kind of backlash to social progress or criticism of the institution of Christianity itself. No matter how vile their tactics are, they see themselves as paladins, white knights in shining armor, defending the cause. You know, the Prince Charming kind, not the very cool and sexy Minthara kind.
Is the little dog trying to intimidate us? If it continues to bark, I will snap its neck.
Bully me, mommy. Oh.
This is where we recenter the evangelical persecution complex. Mason is insistent on letting his audience know that anytime he speaks about the gays, he gets violent death threats. And this tactic is done so deliberately to posit him as a rational, normal person who is the victim of irrational, violent homosexuals that are foot soldiers of the enemy. It's a rhetorical strategy that softens his perspective to anyone who might be a fence-sitter on LGBTQ+ issues. I'm sure some of the messages that he's gotten are terrible and vile and cruel, and I do not condone that kind of behavior. But also, let's use our brains here. People who send death threats in response to bigotry are not acting rationally. It's usually a trauma response. They're angry and fed up with the constant onslaught against our own dignities, be it in our personal or political lives, so they feel like they need to lash out on social media and punch up. Dogpiling bigots online is probably the only ounce of power they feel like they have. It is truly condescending to decry the horrors of drag queen story hour and openly queer people who reject Christian fundamentalism and yet still adopt this love the sinner, hate the sin approach. It's girl-defined Christianity. And I hate it. Programs like the Unchained Leader are particularly dangerous to queer and trans people in fundamentalist communities, especially young queer and trans people. Because they have no social or political agency, they are at the most risk of spiritual abuse from adults in their community. Young, impressionable people are most susceptible to internalizing harmful beliefs about themselves and others because bigotry is learned. And if you are to grow up in a community where your most basic human aspects are treated as a sickness that keeps you away from the love of God, well, let's just say the Unchained Leader has an entire section on a parent-child program. Interesting. It preys on an insecurity that is created by these communities. They're selling you a cure-all to a disease they created. Like with porn addiction or other sexual disorders, morality around homosexuality is defined by cultural norms, not objective truth. And sexual morality, of course, is usually a euphemism that polices individuals into only engaging with their sexuality when it's for the means of procreation. Conversion therapy is a pseudoscience that is dangerous. To bring back Dr. Lay,
websites and advocacy groups that promote and encourage identification as porn addicts are doing harm to their followers and can become like the hucksters promoting naturopathic treatment despite federal medical groups identifying such treatments as ineffective and potentially harmful. Ultimately, all should be held accountable for their inaccurate, outdated, and exploitative actions.
Naturopathy, defined by the US National Center for Complementary Integrative Health, is
a medical system that has evolved from a combination of traditional practices and healthcare approaches popular in Europe during the 19th century. Naturopathy aims to prevent and treat disease by addressing its root cause, based on the belief that symptoms are the body's way of signaling a problem.
Naturopathy aims to prevent and treat disease by addressing the root cause. Sound familiar? Think detox diets, supplements, essential oils, or spinal adjustments. Most medical professionals do not think naturopathy should replace any form of conventional medicine, and in fact, might be harmful when replacing it. There have been instances where naturopathic medicine can lead to life-threatening circumstances. Concerning the harmful impacts of spinal adjustments, for example, the editorial board for WebMD wrote in April 2023,
"As part of naturopathic manipulative treatment, your practitioner may apply pressure to your spine. This can damage arteries, nerves, bones, and spinal discs. In rare cases, it may lead to a stroke."
Naturopathic medicines, while at times helpful in tandem to conventional medicine, are often associated with right-wing health and wellness gurus, or what we call granola fascists. These individuals who promote alternative medicines are, for many, the pipeline into the alt-right. Well, at this point, it's just the right. Individuals like Kane do not trust the science around homosexuality. Rather than understanding how common same-sex attraction is in nature, within species like penguins, they believe it is a behavioral pattern that can be cured through what they euphemistically call reparative therapy. And this can range from all manner of practices, from cognitive behavioral therapy to pastoral counseling to, in some extreme instances, exorcist torture. Now, I am not here to accuse Mason Kane or his program of exorcist torture. From what I have seen online from people who have allegedly been through the program, it is mostly just a bunch of Zoom calls and flaccid attempts at psychotherapy. But I will always make it a point to criticize anyone that thinks they can sell a cure to sexual brokenness, especially if they themselves are not a medical professional or licensed clinician. The damage that programs like the Unchained leader can cause to young and adult queer and trans people is terrible, and it should be criticized. Because more often than not, the scars of those events can last a lifetime.
Part 3. The Cost.
In 2016, author Gerard Connolly published his memoir titled Boy Erased, which was then adapted into a film in 2018, starring Lucas Hedges and Nicole Kidman. The memoir details his upbringing in a Baptist community in Arkansas, his first semester at college, being sexually assaulted by a classmate, being outed to his conservative Christian family by said classmate, and then spending time at the now defunct Love and Action ministry in Tennessee, a conversion therapy ministry that was later revealed to have horrific and unethical practices. To quote a 2018 interview for The Guardian with Connolly,
"At LIA, the message was unequivocal. Homosexuality meant unhappiness, isolation, and death." Connolly recounts a story in which a 19-year-old defector was forced to submit to a mock funeral, as other members read out his obituary describing his slow decline into HIV and then AIDS.
Programs designed to treat homosexuality are often breeding grounds for deeply traumatic experiences, especially for people that are not there by choice. It can be through extreme instances like a mock funeral or an exorcist torture, but can also be through more subtle tactics like consistent psychotherapy sessions that internalize your own self-hatred. The minister who treated Connolly when he visited Love and Action in 2004 was John Smid, who later left the ministry and has since spent the years leaving the program trying to lead an authentic life as a gay man and make up for the harm that he caused many other queer and trans people. He said in an op-ed for Advocate magazine,
Boy Erased was difficult to watch because it vividly illustrated the horrific reality of my own journey over a 25-year period. In 1987, I was taught that my homosexual desires were rooted in sinful places in my dark heart. I was told to submit to God so that He would forgive me of my sinful nature. I was also taught that God was a miracle, and through obedience and faithful life, my sexual orientation could be transformed, and that I would discover my latent heterosexuality.
Hearing those words is painful because I have been there myself. I completely understand why he felt that way and what compelled him to join the Love and Action ministry in the first place. The fact that Smid has turned his life around, found a loving partner and an authentic life, and is attempting to rectify the harm he has caused others, in my opinion, is nothing short of a miracle. Smid has gone on record to say that during his entire time both as a practitioner and a participant in conversion therapy, he himself has never met a single person that has successfully lived life as an ex-gay. When I see the pain that a lot of former ex-gays went through on their journey back to themselves, it reminds me a lot of some of the success stories featured on the Unchained Leaders website.
I started to experiment with my friends sexually, guys and girls. I got into high school, I started to watch porn. I started watching gay porn, and that became a part of my routine. I felt like I was just one of those people that my sin was different than others.
Guys, my name is Seth, and I struggle with lust, porn, masturbation, and same-sex attraction as a Christian for a large portion of my life, and I truly believed it was just how I was made. I want you to know that this is not a life sentence. And what you're feeling, those are simply symptoms of a deeper root that Unchained Leader can help you identify.
I felt like my sin was different. I struggled with same-sex temptation. There were deeper root causes. Mason Kane and other ministers in conversion therapy programs, including this one, might well and truly be motivated by a real desire of altruism to help other people better themselves. But the best counter I can give to that is there is no hate like Christian love. It is a wise phrase that is both equal parts empathetic and condemning. It makes aware the paradox that often Judeo-Christian practices with the most altruistic, noble intentions can often lead to the greatest amount of harm to vulnerable and marginalized communities. I don't want to dismiss the reality of some people that have went through this program that have genuinely found a sense of comfort in non-judgment and community with other people sharing in their sense of struggle. No amount of argumentation that I am making here can take that away from them. But let's also be honest here. There is extensive evidence proving that Christian fundamentalist programs aimed at curing sexual brokenness or disorders are ineffective. The consensus between researchers and psychologists and doctors and former participants themselves is damning. I bet good money that these people who go through the program still watch porn, they still masturbate, and they're probably still DL on Grindr or Sniffies. People who have allegedly been through this program claim online that even its own leadership team are not able to find permanent freedom. They describe instances of going back to porn or same-sex attraction as bumps in the road or relapses. Language that further trivializes the gravity of something as serious as an addiction. When I see the people that say, I used to struggle with same-sex attraction, I don't see a cured person. I see a deeply pained and insecure individual trying to cope with the fact that they do not like their natural resting state. I see a dissatisfied person who is trying everything they can to twist their natural resting state into something more palatable in the eyes of their daddy. And that is what this is, right? A bunch of lost little boys trying to appease this perpetually punishing, disappointed father figure who they call God. Mason keeps saying that same-sex attraction, pornography, masturbation, these sexual disorders are all part of a deeper root problem. He can help you solve them if you just sign up for his 90-day course and give him your personal information. And if you're already dissatisfied with your life and ashamed of your sexuality and how you express it, you're the perfect target. They'll tell you that it's a product of childhood trauma, that it's because your father left your mother, or that your creepy uncle touched you, or that society sexualized you. That's why you're queer. People like Mason do not understand that queerness is a natural phenomenon, so their immediate logical explanation is that it must be a product of trauma. When I was in high school, I was sexually assaulted by a classmate in public, and after that experience, one of my own ignorant relatives asked me, "Is that what made you gay?" Being told at a vulnerable point in your life that your sexuality is a product of trauma, it sucks. It fucking sucks. It makes you feel like you are not real. And that just further amplifies the shame. And shame, that is the root cause, Mason. What links this feeling that you're somehow addicted to porn, to homosexual desire and lust, is shame. It's a powerful feeling that drives people to do terrible things to themselves in the name of alleviating that pain. It's what drove men like Seth and Jeremiah and John Smid to joining these programs in the first place, and in some instances, becoming its biggest leaders. It's also a feeling that can be easily exploited for profit. Quote,
"Most guys come in thinking about what this will cost them, but the real question is, what has staying stuck already cost you? And what will staying stuck continue to cost you?"
This, to me, is manipulative. The most frustrating thing about the Unchained leader to me is that it's run like a business, not just a traditional ministry. You have your CEO, your COO, your twink marketing department, and it's that blend of spirituality and capitalism that, to me, makes the program problematic. A lot of closeted and out queer men are not immune to these ways of thinking, such as blaming all of our community's issues on the fact that a lot of gay men are really sexual.
As a gay man, I genuinely wish I was straight. I wish I could have my own biological kids with the partner I love. I hate dealing with men. I think they're the most stupid, emotionless, egotistical creatures ever created. I hate how toxic the community and dating is.
This internalized homophobia rooted in shame is what ministries like the Unchained leader can take advantage of. You feel an intense sense of distress in your own life about your sexuality and how you're going about it, so you seek out these other communities, locked behind paywalls usually, of other men who have been where you are. But no amount of counseling or therapy can truly ever erase those desires. So you just keep spending your money on more sessions, more group Zoom calls, more retreats, more self-help guides, in an attempt to alleviate a sickness that was created by the vendor. Imagine spending thousands of dollars on a program that doesn't tell you its methods up front, and based on long-standing statistics, will likely not actually fix any of your problems. Shame is at the core of a lot of negativity around human sexuality, be it through what we feel or how we express it. And most people do not seek ways to work through it. They find ways to sedate it. In my own community, I take a look around and I find there are a lot of other people who are struggling with unhealthy coping mechanisms for their shame and insecurity. Nightlife is my favorite aspect of queer culture, yes, but it's a double-edged sword because I think that frequent exposure to substances like alcohol can sometimes inflame people's current ongoing struggles with substance abuse. I do think there is a grain of truth in what Mason Kane says, in that a lot of us do struggle with the moderation in substance and experience, especially when it comes to coping with feelings of negativity. Like, there is a world of difference between approaching sex from a desire of mutual connection and approaching sex from a desire of validation. Intention is everything. However, I would venture to say that the reason we feel these insecurities about our sexuality in the first place is because we live in a goddamn society where any expression of sexuality that isn't strictly heterosexual and or monogamous is seen as a moral defect. It's not hard to internalize shame around your own identity when the most powerful fucking people on the planet see your identity as a monstrosity, that you're a danger to society, and businesses and ministries like the Unchained leader and Love in Action, who seek to exploit all of these insecurities for financial gain and spiritual purpose, are deplorable. I do not give a flying fuck about how pure your intentions are. The impact of a lot of these programs, like the Unchained leader, no matter how small their reach may be or how happy their success stories are, is documented, and documented to be harmful. So, is there a cure for sexual brokenness? No. There is no such thing as a curable sexuality. There is only libido and how we sublimate it. Our journeys to understanding ourselves and our sexualities are personal, they're our own, and someone who tries to police others into God's idea, your idea, of what a healthy sexuality and life and love looks like, is wrong. There is no way to become an ex-gay. There is no cure for sexuality. And there is no hate like Christian love. Let's get started. I suspect this video is going to catch a lot of flack from people in the comments section saying, I'm not a licensed therapist and I'm wrong about sex addiction and that this guy is just a slutty homo who's porn-brained and is trying to find ways to rationalize his debased perversions. And you know what? Yeah, that's true. I'm not the end-all be-all on this subject, and I highly recommend people go and check out more resources to learn more about this topic. The Myth of Sex Addiction by Dr. Lay is a great starting point, yes, but I also recommend looking into The Will to Change by Bell Hooks. That is just, in general, a great perspective on masculinity. I also want to be clear that while the vast majority of this video centers male sexuality and that Unchained Leaders marketing does aggressively target mostly men, femme-presenting people, be they cis or trans, are also victims of conversion therapy. A lot of the research that I have found on conversion therapy centers the experiences of queer men, and I take issue with that, because women's stories matter just as much too. There needs to be more done to make queer and or trans femme victims of conversion therapy's accounts more visible. For further reading on this, I recommend checking out the Miseducation of Cameron post. If I'm speaking candidly off script here, this video has been the most emotionally difficult thing I've ever worked on in my life. I have not spent so much time immersed in such burgeoning language around self-hatred and sexuality while simultaneously confronting my own religious trauma so up close. Working on this video has been incredibly cathartic, but I also feel so hollow. Like everything inside me has been emptied out for the sake of creating a project so rooted in pain and bigotry and torment, and I really hope this project reaches people. But I'm also gonna be honest, I'm fully aware that topics like this don't get favored in the algorithm. I'm very aware that my typical audience have come for Drag Race, and when they find that this video is not gonna be about Drag Race, I'm worried that most of them are not gonna watch. And real talk, that is terrifying, because as a creative, part of the joy of creating is getting feedback from people and your work touching other people. So to not have people watch it feels horrible. But I think I'm clinging to the fact in creating this video that I'm not doing it for the purpose of success or monetization. I'm not monetizing this video. I don't want a fucking cent off this thing, because why would I? It feels wrong to profit off of the pain of other people. And I'm not gonna do that with this project. That would be immoral. But I also hope that no matter what the view count looks like for this video, I hope it does well, at least, you know, for my standards. But even if the view count is not what I would hope it to be, I hope this project reaches someone, and I hope this project helps someone. Unchained Leader has taken up every inch of my brain. I was supposed to work on an entirely different video essay, but I got this ad in some reverse unholy fucked up visitation, Gabriel found dead in a ditch, and now I felt like I had to do something. I couldn't just sit there and be silent. I wanted to do something about this, because honestly, I don't want anyone else to be hurt by this. The thing about this kind of topic is that it's incredibly difficult to talk about. Human sexuality is so complicated. Even with something as simple as what gender you're attracted to comes with all this baggage and nuance and meaning and discourse and shame and pain and bigotry. It's exhausting. There is tons of scientific evidence from trained psychologists claiming that sex addiction and pornography addiction are not real. But there is also plenty of people, debunked or not, that claim the inverse and will also try to provide scientific evidence. Nobody agrees on this. And even though I am more skeptical of individuals who claim that pornography addiction is real, because often their research is funded by right-wingers and or Christians, I'm at least willing to hear them out. And if you or someone you know has found the language of sex addiction treatment to be helpful in turning their life around and making things better, that's valid. I can't take that away from you. So what do we even do about Unchained Leader? What do we do with people who claim that they have a cure to something as basic as human libido? Well, firstly, I think we need to learn to be more skeptical of individuals who claim to be the authority on something. Not just an authority, the authority. In August 2023, 3 former backup dancers of singer-songwriter Lizzo came forward with a lawsuit alleging instances of sexual harassment, fat shaming, religious discrimination, and more. Lizzo claimed that these all came as a shock and that she had a good relationship with these dancers. She felt blindsided. A huge part of the fallout with Lizzo and pop culture, regardless of how true the allegations were, was that prior to the lawsuit, Lizzo created an entire brand around self-love. She was seen as the go-to person for body positivity, especially when it intersected with Black femininity. She was the ultimate motivational poster diva, with her popular reality TV show Watch Out for the Big Girls netting 3 Primetime Emmy Awards. Now, do keep in mind that the backlash against most women of color is always going to be disproportionately harsher than their white male peers. And white men currently in power have gotten away with far worse proven crimes than Lizzo. She is not the final boss of problematic people in power by any means. But I don't think it's wrong to criticize her for her alleged actions. She created this whole mythology around self-love, motivation, body positivity, and when it was revealed that she allegedly did not uphold those values in her personal or professional life, James Somerton great. That's a great way to start a section. YouTube horror story incoming, James Somerton. James Somerton used to be one of the most popular video essayists on YouTube. He was known for making these high-quality, well-produced commentary videos breaking down pop culture through the lens of queerness. He had one of the most substantial followings of any queer creator on YouTube, and often marketed himself as the gay YouTuber. That was, of course, until H-Bomber Guy, true to his name, dropped a fucking H-bomb on his career with his magnum opus, Plagiarism and YouTube, in which he spends over half the video exposing that 99% of Somerton's content was plagiarized. H-Bomber Guy kind of changed the landscape of YouTube with that one. Kind of one of the greatest video essays of all time, a once-in-a-lifetime event. I think similar to Lizzo, Somerton's fallout stung because a lot of people, including his fans, looked up to him as a go-to authority on social justice issues. Many public figures who claim to be the authority on social justice issues are often telling on themselves. It requires a lot of arrogance to build a brand around morality while not also acknowledging your own human frailties and contradictions. I also think that's why I don't claim to be morally consistent. I try my best to do right by others. I want to help people. I want to do right by my communities. I want to offer my best perspective and be informative, but I'm gonna fuck up. I don't think anyone should ever treat me as their moral compass. Don't take what I say as gospel. I can and will be wrong, and I'm going to let you down at some points. Programs like Unchained Leader are harmful because they claim to be the authority on love and sex, when in reality, these are some of the least qualified people to be leading that conversation. If you ever encounter something like that in your life, a program that tries to sell you a cure-all to all your life's problems, it's probably a cult. Get the fuck out of there. My second concluding point is we need to stop treating libido like this demonic force that needs to be defeated, and more so a natural part of our human existence that needs to be intimately understood. Why do some people think they're addicted to pornography or same-sex attraction? Well, for starters, I think it's part of a cultural narrative that we all, to some extent, have internalized. Furthermore, a lot of these individuals tend to think that addiction is a choice, that you can choose to be addicted to porn, or that you can choose to be gay or homosexual. And that's comforting, because if you can choose to be homosexual, well, that means you can choose the opposite. You weren't made this way. You just made some mistakes. Comparing frequent interactions to homosexuality, or sex, or pornography for that matter, to an addiction, I think is emotionally satisfying for people, because it acts as a disavowal while simultaneously making you feel like you are owning up to and being in control of an uncontrollable force. That is your libido. It's a coping mechanism. Because if we accept the reality of our desires, then what? If being gay is a sin and God just happens to make people gay, why would he make them broken and full of evil? Doesn't really seem like God is good all the time now, huh? I believe that when we view human sexuality through such a stigmatizing lens, it alienates us from the responsibility of doing the hard, lifelong work of trying to understand it. Mason says that his secret sin almost destroyed his marriage, but anyone with a functioning brain, critical thinking skills, and 2 eyes can see that 1, he got married at age 21, long before his frontal lobe fully developed, and marriages formed at such an early stage in adult development tend to fail when people are in constant flux. 2, blaming pornography and the adult industry for your own partner's shortcomings or your shortcomings removes the responsibility of understanding how to have a healthy sex life. This is always something I hear straight people complain about, never queer people. They'll often complain that their partner is addicted to porn and that because of that, they're never having sex, he's never showing up for his kids, he's being a flop, he's not participating in the marriage or the relationship. You know what I think? I think people are ashamed that they like porn. Straight up, that's what I think it is. I think people are ashamed they like something that they think is evil, so they disavow it by claiming it must be an addiction. That's why you can't stop watching it. I think the harsh reality is that your porn-addicted partner is trying to find ways to cope with an unsatisfied libido in a domestic partnership that hasn't been sexually fulfilling in years. Porn addiction is a cop-out for people to blame themselves or their partners for being complacent in the obligations of a relationship and or marriage. But the blame itself should not lie on our natural sexuality or innate desires, but the complacency itself. Why? Because when we blame porn and create this narrative of porn addiction, who is going to be the victim of that legislation? Sex workers. I never hear queer people complain about this because we have normalized a little thing called being sluts. Sorry. Open relationships. Queer people tend to be more willing to explore non-traditional patterns of love and sex because, for one, we already exist outside of the heteronormative boundaries, and 2, most of us are acutely aware that one person will never be able to fulfill all of our needs, let alone for a lifetime. So a lot of us are more willing to engage in consensual extra-relational love and sex, because a lot of us do acknowledge our high libidos and prefer the company of multiple partners. To me, it seems entirely foolish to ask a person who's on the asexual spectrum to be strictly monogamous with someone who's hypersexual, or a partner who enjoys penetrative sex with someone who doesn't enjoy penetrative sex. That just seems like a recipe for resentment. Point being is, this demonization of our natural libido can lead to some pretty devastating consequences in the long run for sex workers, and also further promotes shame and stigma around sexuality. Moreover, it alienates us from ourselves, from each other, from agency and responsibility of learning ourselves and knowing our most deep, intimate desires and advocating for ourselves. And liberal people are not immune to thinking like this. Looking at you, fellow Zoomers. Which leads me to my third point. Shame is stupid. There is so much power in reclaiming your own identity, sexuality, and humanity. The Unchained leader's advertising heavily relies on talking about this shame cycle. Resist, fail, repeat. And to me, this seems both unproductive and unhealthy. So I'm not a sex therapist, but if you were to ask me what the solution is, I'd just say, look at Sabrina Carpenter. What is the majority of her Grammy Award-winning album Short and Sweet about? Sex. It's fucking horny. One of the reasons why there's this panic around Sabrina Carpenter being horny on Maine is because we as a society are consistently rediscovering that women can be just as sexually forward and horny as men. But what Sabrina does, I think, is far more healthy for the soul than what people like Mason argue we should do. Whereas Mason says, to be whole is to amputate half of your sexuality, Sabrina takes the more creatively fulfilling approach by sublimating her libido into art. In Juno, she croons, "Adore me, hold me and explore me. Mark your territory. Tell me I'm the only one." Mark your territory, of course, is a euphemism for getting cream pied. The people I know with the most healthy relationship to their sexualities tend to be sex workers or artists. Why? Because these are the people that know best their own sexuality and innate desires and how to healthily channel it into their work, be it art or performance. My suggestion to shame is to not give in, easier said than done, and say yes to your healthy desires. learn how to healthily express them, and find the best partner or partners to fulfill those needs. But that is a problem for your therapist, not for me. Finally, with institutions like the Unchained leader, honestly, I don't think they're ever gonna go away. As long as there's disagreement over sexuality that intersects with religious fundamentalism, there will always be someone practicing conversion therapy, a cure to sexual disorders. And for those people, what I recommend doing is not engaging with them, but blocking them, which is what I've done after publishing this video. Believe me, I would love to ban conversion therapy around the world. Don't get me wrong, but that is a decades-long project that's gonna have to happen over thousands of countries and hundreds upon hundreds of different cultures. In the meantime, arm yourself. Since these chuckle fucks are not going away anytime soon, we need to learn their language. Take the time to understand how and why someone falls into this way of thinking so that you or a loved one does not. If you know a person struggling with their sexuality, be they queer, straight, trans, cis, non-binary, take the time to listen to them. Don't shame or belittle them. Hear their needs, their wants, their desires, and help them find communities where they can healthily express those needs. We all deserve the right, as consenting adults, to pleasure. So say yes to your body, to libido, to passion, to love, to feral queer joy, and say no to societal expectation, to conformity, and to shame. I guess the moral of the story here is, fuck you, Mason Kane. I'm getting YouTube Premium.